Joining me with Reaction are Shannon Butler. She has been following this story for our affiliate, Fox 35 in Orlando. Also, radio talk show host David Webb, former prosecutor Faith Jenkins. Guys, welcome to the program. Shannon, let me start with you. One of the things that is now coming out, you interviewed the first eyewitness, and you put him on tape. And he was adamant in saying that, in fact, it was Trayvon Martin that was on top of George Zimmerman, pounding on and beating George Zimmerman, and now others apparently have come forward.
He was very clear about it. Even this man said that he heard George Zimmerman yelling for help while Trayvon Martin was on top of him, and actually, he said, beating his head into the sidewalk at that point. He told the cops, Zimmerman, that he was yelling for help, but nobody came to his rescue. He had no choice but to fire that gun.
And what about other people now that have come forward, Shannon?
Well, there's been a lot of talk now that people are saying, well, maybe it wasn't exactly like we originally thought. Maybe there is more information out there. The police have now said, look, we wanted to charge him with manslaughter, but the state attorney told us we just didn't have enough information. So even the cops at the time, the Sanford police officers, at least some of them thought that there was possibly going to be a manslaughter charge here. If you look at that police report that was not originally given to us, it says clearly in black and white on the offenses, it says homicide. We ask questions, well, if that's what you thought in the beginning, why wasn't it done? Now sources are telling us that's because they just didn't have enough evidence to do so.
All right, let's talk a little bit, guys, and Shannon, stay right there for just 1 second, and that is not only the rush to judgment. I mean, I go back to early on in the LA Times, they reported what is the family's position? The family, backed by national, local civil rights leaders, say that Martin was in danger, as is any other African-American teenager out alone after dark because of his race. That was the initial narrative. We see that there have been many, quote, civil rights leaders out there protesting. It appears now that this is developing into a very different story than what has been portrayed.
Well, I think you're hearing the other side of the story, which is George Zimmerman's side, which we didn't hear before.
No, not just George Zimmerman, but a witness that saw his head being pounded into the cement and him and Trayvon Martin on top of him beating him up.
Well, I don't think there was ever a dispute that there was a fight. I mean, there was never a dispute that George Zimmerman had these injuries.
Oh, yes, there was. This was described in the beginning as being shot in cold blood.
Right. Well, this was never portrayed in the media as being a fight. This was portrayed as a cold-blooded murder. You know, media didn't do its due diligence in this, and that's the starting point, Sean. The picture you showed at the beginning of the segment, it's one of the first times you've seen a public picture of George Zimmerman, not as a mugshot. You still have Trayvon as a 12-year-old, but this is a 17-year-old young man. The narrative, the visual, and the due diligence they didn't do shows this collusion between the race hustlers, the institutional left, and this idea. I mean, this is what Andrew Breitbart and I have been fighting against for years, showing things truthfully what they are. Media failed. Sharpton, Joe Madison, Mark Thompson, they all went into this. And by the way, Bernard Crump invited Sharpton. This is important. Yeah. Bernard Crump, Sharpton was not reporting on this. Bernard Crump, the attorney for the family, invited Sharpton into this. This was a setup, and why is this at the federal level now?
But right from the beginning, before any facts were in, let me put up the words of Minister Louis Farrakhan, which he sent out in a tweet, which was, you know, where there's no justice, there will be no peace. Soon, and very soon, the law of retaliation may be applied. We have the new Black Panther Party literally putting a bounty on George Zimmerman's head. Watch this.
The money is going to come from the black community. We're already getting support from athletes and entertainers as we speak. By next week, we're looking forward to getting $1 million for the capture of George Zimmerman. We're going to force our government to do their job properly, and if they don't, we will.
No, wait a minute. Listen to what they're talking about here. You have Spike Lee. Goes out on Twitter, gives out George Zimmerman's address, and it turned out not to even be his address.
Those things are completely improper, inappropriate, and even the bounty criminal. Okay, no one should be doing that, and those things really only distract from what we should be focusing on in this case. There are a few things in the very beginning. People were upset because, you know, it looks like there was this murder, this homicide, and the investigation was short-circuited. There are things in the beginning that the police simply didn't do, things that should be a part of their everyday checklist when you have a case like this. Voucher the clothing of the shooter, voucher the gun of the shooter, take a toxicology test of the shooter.
That was a legitimate
They didn't
point.
do those things.
And I thought in the case of George Zimmerman, I didn't like when they said, you know, we don't need you to do that, and he did it. But I want to go back to Shannon, because this is an important point.
Okay.
Shannon, at that point, aren't we told now, in what we learned in this leaked police report, that Zimmerman claimed that, in fact, and I guess it was somewhat corroborated by the eyewitness, that he was going back to the car and that Trayvon Martin very well may have approached him at that point when he was going back to his car?
That's what his friends are saying, and that's what he told the Sanford police. He said as soon as that dispatcher said, we do not need you to follow him, there is an officer on the way, he says then he retreated back to his SUV.
A minute later.
That's what he claimed.
And by the way, and based on the location, does the eyewitness corroborate that was close to the car?
No, he hasn't said that. He did not at least say that to us. I think when the witness came out, it wasn't until he heard the commotion and he heard the screams of George Zimmerman that he came out. And Sanford police will say there's about a minute of time there. They don't really know what happened. And that's that minute from where he saw the fight and it was he retreating to his car. There is a minute there that is still in the debate.
Yeah.
What's really missing here is that the media drove a narrative led by the Sharptons, Jacksons, and everything. The narrative was not about the truth. One of the witnesses that was interviewed, a 13-year-old black child, they wanted to drive a white Hispanic. What does that mean? I mean, this is ridiculous. This was collusion. This is obfuscation.
This would not have happened, okay? This kid would be alive today if George Zimmerman didn't look at him walking down the street and thought that he was suspicious. So you can understand why some people are angry. You can understand why some people are upset about that.
But that doesn't turn to racism, and that's false, Faith. And the problem here is
not every racial profiling.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Not necessarily.
No, it doesn't.
If you see a person, the notion
but this was a neighborhood that had recent criminal incidents, and and so he sees somebody in the neighborhood he doesn't know.
Right. And he describes
could it have been anybody, regardless of race?
He said these a-holes always get away. He doesn't know this.
Was he talking about criminals, or was he talking about somebody's race?
It's about him. He's looking at him.
What do you think? We got to go quick.
Here's the problem. We're trying to get to a race narrative and something that didn't require.
You can't ignore what happened here.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. But I'll tell you what. Bad police work does not mean racism. A-hole does not mean black, white, or whatever. This neighborhood is 47% white. It is mixed of all other races.
That's not been confirmed.
So that's not a valid point.
He's talking about a racial slur. That's not been confirmed.
Not been confirmed.
Well, I listened to it, and I've developed an opinion on what I heard.
All right,
okay,
I go by the facts, and it hasn't been confirmed yet.
Thank you both for being with us. We'll have more on that.